The wind in Wyoming cut like a blade across the ridge, snow driving sideways so hard it stung the skin. Caleb Harrow planted his boots in the drifts and steadied the Winchester against his shoulder. He had been tracking the Morrison gang for 3 long days, fighting cold, hunger, and memories he wished he could bury. Then he saw her. A woman lay in the valley below, pinned in the snow beside a dead horse. Blood spread beneath her like spilled ink, and when she lifted her head, Caleb felt his breath tear loose from his chest. She had his dead wife's eyes, not the same face. Her jawline was sharper, her hair darker beneath the torn hat, but those eyes, the same shade of storm gray that had haunted him every night for 2 years, he should have turned away. The storm was worsening, and the smart move was to let nature take her. In this territory, mercy could get a man killed, but something cracked inside Caleb, something he thought had frozen solid since the day they buried Eliza in Denver soil. The woman tried to crawl toward the pines, her left leg dragging uselessly. Caleb dropped from his horse and moved through the snow with the silent ease of a cavalry scout. His voice came out rough from days without speaking. Easy. I'm not here to hurt you. She twisted toward him, breath coming in short bursts. Her hand fumbled inside her coat and drew a small pistol. Fear and fury burned in her eyes. Stay back! Caleb raised his hand slowly. You're bleeding into the snow. A blizzard's coming. You shoot me, you die anyway. Or you let me help. Your call. Snow thickened between them. She studied him with a strange intensity, as though comparing him to someone she once knew. You're him, she whispered. You're Caleb Harrow. His stomach dropped. In these parts, his name carried more weight than he wanted, and most of it was heavy with grief. Who's asking? Lila Crane, she said, voice shaking with pain. Eliza's sister. The word slammed into him like a rifle butt. Eliza had mentioned a sister once, a schoolteacher in Denver, too stubborn to come west, too proud to believe the frontier could break even the strongest spirit. What are you doing here? He asked. Her answer was a blade. I came to ask why you let my sister die. Caleb felt the old wound rip open again. He'd replayed that day 1,000 times. Eliza riding off toward Denver, refusing to let him come, refusing to let him see how sick she'd become. He had begged her to wait, but she was already slipping away long before the outlaws ever found her. Lila tried to stand and nearly collapsed. She gasped as her injured ankle twisted under her. I heard everything, she said. Sarah McKinnon wrote me. She told me you knew the Morrison gang was hitting that road. She said you let Eliza leave anyway. Caleb closed his eyes. Sarah McKinnon. A woman with a bitter grudge and a talent for twisting truth into poison. You listen to someone like Sarah, he said quietly, and you'll die believing lies. Lila's strength finally gave out. The pistol slipped from her fingers and vanished into the snow. She collapsed, breath shallow, skin turning pale from the cold. Caleb didn't hesitate. He gathered her into his arms. She felt lighter than Eliza ever had, sharper around the edges, like a woman shaped by hard truth and cold winters. I hate you, she whispered weakly. Good, he muttered as he lifted her onto his horse. Hate'll keep you warm. But when she rested against his chest, something in her voice shifted. Not just hatred, not just anger, recognition, as if she saw something in him she hadn't expected. Caleb knew then, with the certainty of a man stepping toward a cliff's edge, that bringing Lila Crane into his home would tear open every wound he'd buried. She was fire to his frozen heart, danger to his quiet misery. But the storm was rising, and she would not survive the night alone. He turned his horse toward the cabin. 3 miles through the blizzard, 3 miles toward the past he never wanted to face. Inside the warm lamplight of his cabin, Lila stared around the room with a look that cut deeper than any knife. Everything was exactly as Eliza left it. Her sewing basket beside the hearth, her blue dress hanging near the window, the faint scent of lavender that never seemed to fade. You still keep her things, Lila whispered. Caleb didn't answer. He carried her to Eliza's old chair by the fire and knelt beside her injured ankle. His touch was steady, but she could see the effort behind it, the tremor he tried to hide, the grief etched into every line of his face. "You look like her," he said softly, "but different. Stronger, maybe." Lila forced herself to hold his gaze. "Tell me why she died." Caleb wrapped her ankle in silence. Then he stood, staring into the fire as if the flames held the truth he feared to speak. "She had cancer," he said finally. "She hid it from everyone, even you." The room seemed to tilt beneath Lila. Her breath caught. "No, she would have told me. She always told me everything." "She made me promise not to," Caleb said. "She didn't want anyone to see her weak." Lila's voice cracked. "Why did she go alone that day?" "Because she wanted to spare me," he whispered. Even at the end, the cabin fell silent except for the wind clawing at the windows. Lila stared at him, the storm inside her stronger than the one outside. Everything she'd believed was collapsing. Everything she'd come to accuse him of was falling apart. And the most terrifying part was not the truth. It was the way he looked at her now, as if she was the first warm light he'd seen in 2 years, as if the dead were finally letting go. The blizzard did not let up for 3 long days. Snow piled high against the windows, the wind howling like a living creature trying to claw its way inside. Lila Crane sat by the fire with her bandaged ankle elevated, watching Caleb move around the cabin with a quiet intensity that unsettled her more than the storm itself. He kept his distance at first, bringing firewood inside, checking the shutters, working silently at the table with his tools. But no matter where he stood, she felt his eyes on her, not in judgment, not in anger, in recognition. At night, he slept on the floor by the hearth, wrapped in a blanket, as if the cold was easier to face than the heat between them. But on the second night, when frost began forming on the inside of the windows, she knew they couldn't survive like that. "You'll freeze down there," Lila said softly. "I'll be fine." "No, you won't." Her voice steadied. "You can sleep in the bed. I'll stay on the edge. We'll keep a pillow between us." He stood at the doorway as if he had reached the edge of a cliff. "Lila, that's not safe." "It's cold," she said. "Not dangerous, cold." They both knew she was lying. Caleb finally climbed under the quilt, stiff as a man waiting for his own execution. The pillow between them felt like a paper-thin wall trying to hold back a rising flood. She could hear his breathing, slow, controlled, until her arm brushed his in the dark. The air shifted. Warmth moved between them. And something deep inside Lila, something she had locked away behind grief, anger, and guilt, rose to the surface. "Tell me about her," she whispered. "Tell me about Eliza." Caleb went still. For a long moment he didn't speak. Then his voice came, low and rough. She used to sing while she worked, mostly Irish songs her ma taught her. She'd burn every biscuit she touched, but she'd sing anyway. Lila smiled weakly into the darkness. "She wrote that to me once." Caleb's voice warmed. "She tried to teach me to dance, nearly broke my foot in the process. She said you danced like a bear." This time he laughed. The sound surprised them both. It was rusty, unused, but real. They talked until the fire died down to glowing embers, about Eliza, about Denver, about the ranch and the land Caleb had built with his own hands. And somewhere in those quiet conversations, the space between them began to shrink. By the third morning, Lila could feel him before she even opened her eyes. The warmth of his body, the steady breath at her back. The pillow had slipped to the floor sometime in the night, and neither of them had moved it. Later that day, when they worked together to fix a shutter the wind had torn loose, it happened. Lila held the board in place while Caleb hammered it back into position. The wind blew snow across the porch, forcing him to lean closer. His breath brushed her ear, warm and soft in the cold air. She turned instinctively, and suddenly his face was inches from hers. Gray eyes, scarred jaw, a loneliness so deep it felt like a mirror to her own. "Lila," he whispered, her name carrying a weight that made her knees weak. "I know," she breathed. He touched her cheek with fingers that trembled, tracing the line of her jaw as if asking for permission he hadn't earned. She leaned into the touch before she could stop herself. "This is madness," he murmured. "Yes." But neither moved away. His hand slid to the back of her neck. Her breath caught, and then he kissed her. It was not gentle. It was years of grief, loneliness, and longing poured into one desperate moment. Lila responded with a hunger that shocked her. Shocked him, too, if the sound he made was anything to judge by. He lifted her onto the workbench, his body pressing between her knees. Her hands found his shoulders, then his chest, feeling scars and muscle and warmth she had no business wanting. His mouth moved to the side of her throat, and a soft cry escaped her before she could swallow it. "Leela," he whispered again, voice rough with need. "I've tried not to want this. So have I." His fingers worked at the buttons of her dress, clumsy with urgency. Her hands tugged at his shirt, needing to feel skin. Every part of her tingled with heat. But then she saw it. On the windowsill above the workbench stood a small carved jewelry box. Eliza's. Her breath caught. Guilt slammed into her chest like a runaway horse. She pushed him away, heart pounding. "No, Caleb, stop. We can't." He froze instantly, breathing hard, confusion then pain crossing his face as he followed her gaze to the box. "Jesus," he whispered. "What are we doing?" Lila clutched her dress to her chest. I don't know. The storm outside was finally clearing, but inside the cabin everything felt colder. Caleb stepped back, jaw tight. "You should go," he said quietly. "When the trail opens." "I know." Even as she said it, her voice trembled. Neither looked at the other as they returned to the cabin. Neither spoke as they prepared for the storm's end. But every breath in that room carried the weight of what almost happened. And by morning, the danger they feared arrived. Hoofbeats thundered outside. Caleb straightened before she even reached the window. "Company." "What kind?" Lila whispered. "The kind that brings trouble." Amos Whitaker rode into the clearing with 6 armed men at his back, and he had come for her, and for Caleb, and for blood. The morning air was sharp as broken glass when Amos Whitaker rode into the clearing with 6 armed men behind him. Their horses snorted clouds of steam, hooves crunching over fresh snow. Lila stood behind Caleb on the porch, her heart slamming against her ribs. Whitaker tipped his hat with a smile that held no warmth at all. "Mrs. Crane," he called, "I reckon you ought to come out. Folks in Red Rock are mighty concerned about your reputation." Lila felt heat rise in her cheeks. A woman's honor was fragile in the frontier. One whisper could destroy her. Caleb stepped forward, his hand resting on the butt of his Colt. "You got something to say, Whitaker. Say it to me." Whitaker ignored him, eyes locked on Lila. "You stayed here alone for 3 nights with a man who ain't your husband. A man with a history as dark as winter midnight. That kind of behavior brings shame on a lady." Lila walked onto the porch before Caleb could stop her. Her chin lifted high. "My reputation is none of your concern." Whitaker's smile widened, mocking. "Everything in this valley is my concern, especially